Is Aurora OP at the moment? We're nerfing her, so we have decided that she is overpowered. That doesn't mean she's completely game-breaking or ruining the game, but it does look that, like, you know, she's a bit strong. So we are nerfing her next patch. But again, like, the thing I'm trying to get at is, like, I don't think it's a bad result that we're nerfing Aurora. Like, I think sometimes people will come in and they'll be like, August, you guys are nerfing Aurora, which means that you're bad at your job and you had to change a champion. Get good. And it's like, I just don't agree with that line of thinking. I think, like, it's totally fine to have a character who, like, comes out, they're not perfectly balanced, and as long as we follow up pretty quickly and get them into a good space quickly, like, I think that's okay. And also, I think there's a difference between a character who comes out and isn't perfectly balanced in a way that's, like, very, very frustrating and very problematic versus a character who might just be a little strong, right? So, like, I would, so as an example with Aurora, I think, like, Aurora's release, my opinion on it, like, at least so far, has gone fairly well. She's a cool champ, she's playable, see a lot of, like, people trying her out, see her on Eugene's stream, get to see Pobelter play some Aurora, and she's probably a little strong. And so we're gonna like make sure that she has some adjustments to account for that. On a live game like League of Legends, I don't think the end goal should be like you never have to change anything. The end goal should be that when, like, problems are happening, when something's not perfect, that you're able to quickly follow up on it and get into a good spot in a good amount of time. But that's, like, kind of like the idea with, like, a living, breathing game like League, is there's always going to be stuff to think about and improve, and not everything is going to come out exactly perfect. Why buff Yasuo E? How much a difference 20 damage on a 7-second dash makes? I mean, you're not thinking about it correctly. 20 damage on a dash that he can use on you repeatedly in lane? That's a big deal. That change is just making it so he can fight you in lane a lot better, which is a very real difference. And if you're wondering, like, why we're buffing Yasuo, Yasuo is getting a lot weaker with all the changes that have happened to crit items and lethal tempo. There aren't really crit items that are good on melee champions anymore, and so that makes Yasuo in a lot worse spot in terms of the item system. Like, obviously he can still build Infinity Edge and it's still viable on him, but, you know, compared to some of the things he was able to buy previously, there's just not as many great options for crit, and the crit you do buy is just not going to get you as far. So Yasuo is suffering a bit. Plus he's lost a lot of attack speed, which, you know, his Q is pretty reliant on. Challenger Korea doesn't know how to play against Yasuo. Korea and China are some of the people who are best playing against Yasuo, actually. So Yasuo is typically, when he's a frustration problem, it's very an NA. It's a very NA and Europe kind of thing, frustration. Eastern regions tend not to find Yasuo all that frustrating. They're like, yeah, here's how you deal with this guy. Whereas, like, NA and EU tend to be upset, much more upset when Yasuo is good. Why do we remove crit from KRAKEN then? Because KRAKEN with crit on it is fairly messed up in terms of what it does for AD carries. And so, while the crit items aren't very good for melee champions anymore, they are more appropriately balanced for AD carries in terms of the costs we want to, like, put on their item system. So as an example, an item like Kraken Slayer having attack speed, AD, and crit is, like, basically just means you're going to get it every game, and then all the future attack speed items you buy are going to feel a lot worse for an AD carry. And so the AD carry crit item system was, like, kind of, like, reworked to ensure that if you're buying crit items, you are giving up a stat, either AD or attack speed, depending on which item you buy. Why does YORICK have a high win rate and low elo? I think that's something that's not okay. And I guess my follow-up question is, why is that not okay? Like, why is it not okay for a champion to win a lot in low elo? Because you're right, YORICK does have, is a very strong low MMR character. He's a pub stomper. But, like, why is that necessarily bad that he pub stomps? Like, we definitely balance him so that he's not completely broken in low elo, right? There's a maximum amount of win rate we have there. But it's like, it's totally fine for certain characters to be much better in the hands of low elo players or much better in the hands of high elo players, depending on the character. YORICK, as an example, the character's entire kit has too much counterplay. Everything he does is full of counterplay. And so one of the reasons he's so good in low MMR is low MMR players don't know how to counter YORICK. They don't know how to play around his spells, and so they die to him. Whereas the higher you get it, the better you get at the game, the better you are at playing against YORICK. And so one of the reasons I'd say it's probably okay that YORICK is really good in low MMR is that most of the reasons he's good in low MMR are things you can learn to play against and get better at playing against and eventually learn to beat. As an example, low MMR players don't destroy his wall. YORICK's wall in low MMR is a 4-second stun. YORICK's wall in high MMR sometimes doesn't do anything, right? So there's a lot of, but like that's something you can learn, right? When you play against a YORICK, there's a lot of ways you can legitimately get good in order to beat him. People don't have fun in low elo playing against him. Well, people don't have fun in high elo playing against certain characters as well. Another thing that you have to think about here is there's a difference between the character is frustrating and the character shouldn't be viable or not in the game, right? There are going to be characters that are frustrating. Like, one of the things we have to accept about low elo is that characters like YORICK, Master Yi, Zed, a lot of assassins, a lot of melee champs are going to be more frustrating because in low elo, the counterplay is not there. Specifically, like stun the guy, group against the guy, things like that, right? Now, there's a limit to that. Like, your game does need to be fun. Your game does need to be fun to play for low MMR players. Your game does need to be learnable and enjoyable for low MMR players. But one of the things we accept about low MMR, with League being a competitive game, is that there are certain characters who we find it is reasonable that the expectation when playing against them is you learn how to play against them better. And eventually you won't have the issues you run into because you'll learn. There's a maximum level of frustration we're willing to allow, and we generally don't think that YORICK like goes beyond that maximum level. If we were balancing the game completely around like that type of frustration, and we felt it was inappropriate, like we would probably have to delete Master Yi from the game, as an example. As that guy, with, you know, the way he wins, tends to be like, you know, fairly beyond the pale when you're a player who like doesn't know to group up and stun him, the way he wins. But we think that's like a generally acceptable thing within certain bounds because you can learn to beat it. And then Zed is an example of a character who's the limit. Like, he actually is the limit. Like, and he is a character that we tend to balance around his frustration. And so there is a limit that we're willing to accept, but it is not a design goal that you go into a game and never experience frustration. Because at the end of the day, League of Legends to some degree is a zero-sum game, and for everybody being frustrated, there is somebody who's probably having a great time, right? And so the question is like, are the things they doing worth the frustration they cause? Some things are, like Master Yi, I'd argue very fun character, a lot of people really like him, even though he's frustrating to play against, and some things aren't, like a Kali Shroud under towers. Why are some characters only balanced for the 0.01% over the 99%? Like, if I find a pro character, why can't I enjoy them because of pro? Because we'll start out with, there's 160 champions in League of Legends, so not every champion needs to be for you. And I know that's rough because sometimes a champion that you want to be for you isn't, and like, that sucks. I'm not saying that doesn't suck, it definitely sucks. That could be really sad. That said though, League of Legends pro play, I think it's a little incorrect to say balanced for the 0.1%. Because you have to understand that just because only 0.1% of players play in pro, it doesn't mean that, A, they don't deserve to enjoy the game. That's important. But then also, they do deserve to enjoy the game, is what I mean, to make sure that that's clear, right? They deserve to enjoy the game. But also, the vast majority of League of Legends players watch pro and care about pro. And so even though not every League of Legends player plays pro, pro is popular enough with players in general in terms of being a watched thing, that it's still incredibly important that it's well balanced and fun. Like, that's something that has to be true, even if not everybody's playing it.